Okay, this is day 2 of being consistent in making these videos. So like I said, I have these SPAR cards and they allow me to basically have a framework to discuss certain things. Although, what's pretty interesting to me as of lately is the upcoming presidential election in 2024. And for the first time, it seems like we have a variety of potential candidates that actually want to shift the narrative in the country, want to shift the trajectory that we're headed towards. And, for the most part, they seem to have a plan of action in executing that on both sides. Between RFK and Vivek, I see tremendous potential. And, I lean more towards Vivek, maybe because I'm more conservative in nature, although I believe a lot of liberal ideals. I think it's a balance. I think most people are composed of a mixture of both things. I don't think the line is necessarily right down the middle. And, sometimes it's hard to delineate between the two parties if you just keep the ideas, the focus, and the issue around the American ideal, right? That's to say that if we prioritize American exceptionalism, something that Vivek and I believe RFK are huge proponents of, then you come to realize we have much more in common than not. So, yeah, I'm really hopeful, as far as the con between the both candidates, RFK and Vivek. One of the things that concerns me about RFK is his anti-vax position. And I wouldn't necessarily say he's anti-vax. I would say he's pro-vaccine regulations and pro-efficacy, but I think his message can be misconstrued as an anti-vax position. That's one of the biggest cons that I have with RFK. And as far as Vivek is concerned, the guy is extremely intelligent, and he's very articulate and persuasive. But, he's a huge advocate for nationalism. And, sometimes when the scale gets tipped in one direction, it often comes back in the opposite direction with equal and opposite force. And that may lead to, that's dangerous, right? Because nationalism, of course, on the right can be made manifest in extreme conditions as fascism, and on the left in extreme conditions as communism. So, my concern with him is, maybe he's leaning, hopefully it's just a ploy, because he realizes that if you establish the veneer of being the polar opposite of what the establishment is or what the status quo is, that'll allow you to attract attention and visibility. And unfortunately, it seems like the presidency is somewhat of a popularity contest. So the more eyes, the more attention, the better. But that's my concern with him, is that maybe he's leaning too far into that nationalistic approach. And that can be dangerous past a certain point. But no, they're both stellar candidates. I think ideally, in the perfect world, what I would suggest, and something I'd like to lay forward, is let's say the race comes down to Vivek and RFK, hypothetically. And let's say RFK wins. I think by default, it's a thought experiment, by default, the opposing party, the runner-up, should be the VP. So you have a purple ticket, not just red or blue. You have RFK as the president and Vivek as the VP, which creates this equilibrium, this sense of balance that is not just balance, but unity would be a better word, that is deeply needed right now in our country. And having equal and opposite forces together in the White House would be tremendously beneficial, in my view. And it forces the conversation. It forces us to have the difficult conversations and try and find a middle ground. Because I think for a vast majority of issues, most people do fall somewhere in the middle. But on those things that are more contentious, the only way to really find resolve is having those difficult conversations. And the left and the right are needed, right? From a societal perspective to a psychological perspective, the duty of the right is to conserve the things which have brought us and enabled us to be successful thus far, right? That's why they're conservatives. They protect the foundation, the principles, the ideals that make us who we are, that make America what it is today. And they're right in conserving that and trying to preserve it. And the duty of the left is to make sure that we're increasingly progressing forward and that certain demographics or groups don't get left behind. And to recognize nuance and complexity and be able to adjust in real time, right? To be agile. And having those two things juxtaposed is the key. You can't have too much conservatism, but you also can't have too much progression. Right? Because if you're too conservative, you end up being stagnant and you don't actually move forward, you don't actually grow. But one of the components of continually growing and expanding and being progressive is that you're constantly in contact with the unknown, right? Which is chaos. So you may have a bunch of new ideas, but they haven't been tested. And if you try and change the status quo too quickly without consideration for what has gotten you to this certain point, it could disrupt the entire system altogether. So the true solution is a red and blue ticket in the White House, right? Because it highlights the opposition of both these perspectives, highlight and bring out the best in its reciprocal, in its counterpart. Yeah. But it's exciting to say the least. So now onto the questions. First, which should you trust more, your head or your heart? I would say your head, because logic and reason oftentimes trumps emotion. 9 times out of 10. I would go as far as to say maybe even 10 times out of 10, but that would be too extreme. But I would say your head for certain, especially if you've cultivated the mental faculties to, enable proper discernment, you should use your head. It allows you to see things for what they really are, if you can, if you're in the position to, rather than act on emotion, which oftentimes is fleeting and spontaneous. And that's not the proper way to make decisions. You want to convince a friend or sibling not to watch so much TV. What's the best argument for or against limiting TV watching to an hour a day? It's pretty simple. Television, depending on what you're watching, actually erodes your mind, especially if it's brainless. Unless you're actively watching a documentary where you're engaged in learning, for the most part, people watch television passively, and half the time they're watching TV and they're on their phones anyways. So the argument to limiting your TV consumption is one of potentially increasing your mental growth. So not only do you want to limit your TV, but in those extra hours that you do have, you fill it with things that are more productive, reading, maybe arts and crafts, a project, get out in nature. All these things create much more stimulation, much more engagement with your mind and your surrounding environment. And television tends to plug us into this matrix of some sort and makes us more mindless and zombie-like than engaged and interacting with life itself. It's now theoretically possible to resurrect extinct animals such as the woolly mammoth and the passenger pigeon. Should we do it? What are the pros and cons? I don't think we should. I think animals that have gone extinct for a specific reason. Although we're in this position where we have become the apex of this planet, and in that role have garnered some type of control over evolution itself, that doesn't mean we should play God, right? If an animal has gone extinct, it's because of either environmental degradation of its native, call it living area, or it doesn't compete in the hierarchy, right? It's not. I guess my perspective would be, since we are, somewhat the arbiters of nature, and whatever effects we have on the ecosystem, deleterious or not, if an animal has gone extinct due to human effect or lack thereof, then it needs to stay that way. Because first of all, if we bring back woolly mammoths, the world is not what it used to be, so they wouldn't even survive in this environment. They would have to adapt, and I don't think they can adapt fast enough at the rate in which the world is changing. And also, if we were to bring back a specific animal, it may cause a disruption in current ecosystems that have stabilized due to the ecology and animals that are present in today's day and age. We don't know the effects of introducing a different species into that hierarchy. So although we have the ability to do such things theoretically, I do not think it would be prudent. I think it would actually have the opposite effect. I think the attention is in the right place, which is, since now we have the ability to not only preserve, but allow nature to flourish and rehabilitate it and bring back those animals. Once we open that Pandora's box, there's no telling what may occur. We can't close it, and we just don't know the first, third, or second order derivatives. Woolly mammoths could interact with another animal, say pigs per se, and a disease could jump from a woolly mammoth to a pig and then eventually to a human, a disease that we're not equipped to handling because we haven't seen it in this day and age. So I think ultimately the intention is in the right place, but the outcome is far too complex to do something like that. What's better, to be the funny person who can make anyone laugh, or the person who finds humor in almost every occasion? I think the funny person who can make anyone laugh, because humor is a great weapon. It's a great tool, and if you can inject humor in your daily conversations and interaction with people, it makes you more likable, of course, and if you're more likable, you can have you can have a better opportunity at creating more meaningful relationships, which in turn would increase your degree of happiness. Could cursive handwriting be taught in schools anymore? No. Cursive handwriting is at this point anachronistic. It's not needed. Everything is digital, right? For the most part, kids are typing on their tablets or their iPhones or their computers. So it's kind of redundant, and it's this vestigial form of literature, right? And study that is no longer needed. And I think we've evolved past that. And eventually we won't even need to type because we'll have some type of neural link directly to our computers. And the moment we think something, it'll happen instantaneously. So I think it's just a way of progress that certain modes and methods of doing things end up dying. If you find a historical treasure in your own backyard, an ancient coin or dinosaur bone, does it belong to you? Make a case for or against assuming ownership. I think it depends on the historical significance of the artifact. If it's an artifact that is connected to something greater in and of itself, for example, if you found like a document that's connected to, George Washington or John Smith writing The Wealth of Nations, right? Due to the significant historical impact of said document, you could say that it belongs to the nation or the country or the swaths of people that it's had downstream effects on. But if you were to find, something that is not so historically significant, you could say it belongs to you. But I think the question really lies in My contention lies in the monetary value of said object. So if the object is actually worth a significant chunk of money, I think the person should be compensated by whatever organization or group that's going to then claim it and try and preserve it for the greater good, right? But I think if someone does find something and it's worth a lot and it has significant historical impacts, then it should belong to the people, but that individual should be compensated to some degree for said artifact. That's what I think. So that's day 2, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.